and welcome to Leaders in Conversation with me, Annie Townend. Leaders in Conversation is the podcast in which leaders weave together the threads of their life and leadership stories, the people, places and experiences that have shaped them, their values, their beliefs, passion and purpose to encourage and inspire you to be even more confident and courageous in your leadership. My guest today is Marisa Kismul, Senior Vice President, Human Resources, Civil Airframe, GKN Aerospace. I'm Annie Townend, podcast host and partner to executives, leaders and their teams, and co-founder of Collaboration Equation with Lucy Kidd. The title of our conversation is How Can We Help Leaders to Be Successful Through Times of Transition and Change? Marisa offers valuable insights into supporting change and transition for success, helping people to be their best, the link between engagement, development and performance, and the importance of equity and fairness, especially in leading change and transition. Welcome, Marisa.
Thank you, Annie. It's a pleasure to join you in one of these podcasts. I'm a little bit nervous, having never done one before, but hugely excited.
Well, Marisa, I was reflecting on having known each other for such a long time. And I think between us, we've worked out that we've known each other for 16, 17 years. And we first met on a leadership programme. In fact, it was during that time and subsequently that I decided I wanted to set up a podcast in which leaders like yourself could share their leadership story, because I would be in a room with leaders, they'd be sharing their leadership stories, and I'd be thinking these stories are so encouraging, so confidence building and so inspiring. How can I share them more widely? So it's a delight to me that today is the first time you've ever been on a podcast, and that seed of an idea of making this podcast for people to tell their stories was born during the time of working with you at GKN on the Leadership Development Programme.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think I've been blessed to work at such a wonderful organisation filled with amazing people with amazing stories for what is nearly 19 years.
Wow. That is a long time to be in any one company. And during that time, you've been on a journey yourself. And I'm looking forward to hearing about your journey, starting with who are the people, the places and experiences that have shaped your values, your beliefs, your passion and purpose. And what are your values and beliefs and your passion and purpose that have kept you at such a prestigious company, GKN?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the first question there. I, like many people, early influences really my parents, particularly my mum. She was passionate about education. She had done pretty well at school herself way back when, and then had become a librarian, actually. And her parents had really wanted her to go to library school up in Liverpool, and she never did it. And it was one of her life's regrets. She didn't take advantage of that extra educational opportunity. I think she instilled in me the value of learning and education and doing well and doing your best and taking every opportunity that comes your way right from an early age.
That's great to hear. And I have never heard of library school. So there was such a thing.
There was such a thing back in the late 50s, early 60s.
That's amazing. So that was born out of her showing to others that she was very capable, but she chose not to go to library school.
She did. She got a job. She actually got a job in the library in the town in which we live. And then she went on to be a librarian in sixth form college in the town where we live, and also one of the secondary schools. So again, I think she instilled in me that work ethic. She was never afraid to do more than one job if times required it. And they often did. For a large part of my childhood, it was just me and mum. She was the steadying influence on my life, and she's 81 now. Her zest for life is still incredible. And again, I think she instilled in me the value of friendship. She's still got a big circle of friends. She has a full life, which is wonderful because she was carer for my stepfather for a few years once he got dementia and really needed that. We lost him last year. You know, she started to rediscover herself. She's gone through that transition, that change of life on her own again, and how she rebuilds from that. And I find that an inspiration at 81.
Hearing about that, and given that the title of our conversation is about change and transition and supporting people to be successful, losing someone is one of life's biggest transitions, going from living with to living for your mum on her own again. And being on her own, it reminds me how important friendship is, and community and loyalty, which is something that I know to be true of you. The fact that we've known each other for 16 to 17 years is a testament to relationship, you building big relationships. And it's not like you and I chat with each other on a regular basis, but we connect with each other, and I know that I feel very loyal to you and I feel your loyalty to me. And it seems to me that's something you also learnt from your mum and perhaps from your stepdad too, Marisa.
Well, yeah, and my dad. And friendships were always important. Well, I think I went through phases as young people do, having big circles of friends, but there are the stalwarts of my life. There are people that I've been friends with since I was 8, 9, 10 years old. My best friend lives in Australia. I've known her since we were 16. We met on induction day at Sixth Form College. And even though we don't see each other often, we connect. And I would say this is true of a lot of my long-term friends. We may not see each other, but when we do, it was like yesterday. It's that power of human connection. And as we've changed and transitioned through our lives with work and marriage and children and loss, we've always been there for each other. I think loyalty is massively important.
It's an important value of yours, along with the hard work ethic and I've known you to be a very hard worker. You very diligently prepared for our conversation, and I really appreciated that.
You're important to me, so it was important to me that this went as well as it could do. Never having done one before, I wanted to put some thought into it. And I think working with yourself over the years and some of your colleagues in that piece of work we did, it really brought home the value of reflecting upon who you want to be, who's the leader you want to be, how do you want to be in life, not just in work. And I often go back to those questions, Annie, that we started to explore so long ago.
Yes, we did. And those questions, they more or less are the same questions around, for me, who are you? Why are you here? Finding different ways to help people tell that story of who they are and why they do what they do, and then how, as you say, they can be the leader that they want to be and be the best version of themselves, very consciously thinking about how can I live those values and beliefs through my behaviour, through my leadership behaviour.
I have a team now that we've worked together largely for the last 4 years in this particular setup. I've got some newer members and I've got some members in my team that we've worked together for much longer than that. So that loyalty and wanting people to be at their best transfers into what I do at work and who I am at work just as much as it does outside.
And outside of work, I know you're married, and you mentioned that's another, getting married, forming a relationship is huge as well.
I was just married when we met. Yeah, so Alex and I got married in March 2009, and we're coming up to our 17th wedding anniversary. But we've just actually celebrated being together for 24 years, which we think is a bit of a milestone. And we would both honestly say that our marriage has seen change and transition in and of itself as we've both got older. But as our wants and needs have changed through that period, and I think we, inspired by what I learned through our time working together, we often spend time thinking about what's the future. And some of this stuff never comes to fruition, but we quite enjoy dreaming about what will be our future and what we can do and what we could do and what possibilities are and what's really important to us both and how we get joy out of life.
And it is all about having those open conversations, isn't it? And I think leadership is all about who we are, all of who we are, and together leading for that future and thinking from the future is really important. And it's a place of hope and possibility, which is sometimes really hard for us to get hold of. So having a partner, you having Alex, somebody with whom you can do that together and think about growing older together. What would you like that to be? And something you've heard me speak about, having a picture of what success might look like, led by the future, and then thinking back from that to then, how can we make that happen? What are the steps that we need to take? And making small steps towards that. And then along the way, finding actually the picture of success is changing because we're changing. How can we be successful and help each other to be our best during those times? What have been some of the challenges, Marisa, for you both in work and at home by way of leading for the future and the sense of possibility?
I couldn't have done what I've done at work if it weren't for Alex and the way that he has supported me. And we've spoke about leadership support networks in the past, and he's been front and centre and a huge champion of that. And some of that is about him knowing what makes me happy and where I get a sense of accomplishment from, but also us being able to do some of the things that we've been able to do and experience some of the things we've been able to experience. I spent quite a few years working in and around the Nordics with GKN. My husband's family are from Norway. And we got the opportunity to, instead of me come home some weekends, Alex would come and join me. And so we got the chance to explore these beautiful countries and interesting cities and really absorb some of the culture at that time in both Sweden and Norway. It was a real privilege to be able to do that. And we love exploring. So we quite often, on holidays and things like that, we'll go off walking, and we now have a dog. We only holiday in the UK now because of the dog, but she's brought great joy to our life. And I think has brought a sense of calm and also simplicity as well. There's nothing simpler than just loading the car up and heading off.
We're very fortunate in that regard, aren't we? One, that we can walk. And I think too, that to get so much pleasure from simply walking. And you may remember that it's something which I've integrated for almost as long as I've known you into my work, initially with individuals who sought me out for executive coaching, and through that walking side by side in nature and drawing on nature, the sense of place and learning from being in nature and all that nature can teach us. But then also nowadays, always, and for the past few years, wherever possible, integrating paired conversations, walking and talking, and helping people to, if they're not able to walk, to simply sit alongside each other, to have that side-by-side conversation. And it's sometimes complicated conversations, easier and simpler because we're walking forwards, or we're not looking at each other head on. We are side by side.
Yeah, absolutely. And the side-by-side conversations, certainly in the work setting post-COVID, we work a lot virtually. But it's so important to make sure that we've still got that human connection. And, virtual workings, it is incredible. And you still need to be side by side, face to face. Sometimes people need a hug. They need a real reassuring glance. You need the water cooler conversation. I notice a lot of the people that I work with, the migration back to the office for that human connection, people who live by themselves, clearly get a lot from that in a work setting. And we are lucky that we still have those offices. We are manufacturing, so the majority of our people have to be on site anyway. We have noticed a marked increase in the amount of people returning to be part of the team.
Yeah, it's back to that being part of that sense of belonging, isn't it? And of being part of a team, but also back to place, having a place that you go to where you know you will be hopefully well met and you'll be able to enjoy connection. And I certainly think, and I've thought a lot about this more recently, when people come together who are perhaps not in manufacturing world, where people naturally are likely to be together on the floor or on site, encouraging leaders to think differently about when people come together who for the most part perhaps are working virtually or in a very hybrid way, to think differently, I think, about the purpose of the coming together and bring it back to human connection and open conversation. And it's something that Lucy Kidd, who you also know, and I talk a lot about in Collaboration Equation, that coming together to find your collaborative edge is about deepening human connection and open conversation.
Absolutely. And, working in a global organisation and in a global team, that collaboration, well, it's hard. You have to work really hard at it. And I think the pressure and a lot of external influences now that maybe we didn't have in years gone by. I don't get a sense that the world really wants collaboration at the moment. So I think collaboration in organisations has to be fostered and harnessed, not just for people like me that've been in an organisation for a long while, but those entering the workplace as well, the younger generations that are coming through apprenticeships and graduate schemes, and their world is virtual. So how we encourage that human connection and collaboration in the workplace for those populations in particular, I think is hugely important. And I was in our Global Technology Centre yesterday. The apprentices were there at lunchtime. We've got this wonderful cafeteria. It's got a pool table. The place was alive with games and groups of people sat around having really good conversation. And the noise was wonderful. It was just so alive. And we certainly want to encourage more of that within our workplaces.
It's about that engagement, development and performance, isn't it? It's that everybody being in the same place. And I come back to place again, but that place facilitating fun and conversation and play through people being able to find either a table to sit at or a chair to sit in and talk with somebody who they might not have met before and strike up a conversation. Who are you? What do you do here? And choosing to have those kind of conversations that build relationship and build engagement, and choosing sometimes not to go and sit with the person, but to look around and see, I haven't met that person before. And for leadership like you, Marisa, to be encouraging that and striking up conversations, to be enjoying that kind of human connection, and how we foster that in a place where people feel their diversity is welcomed, they feel included, and a sense of belonging.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And I think social mobility is really important to me. I think largely because I had humble beginnings, but also the location globally of some of our factories and making sure that our workforces are representative of the communities that we're a part of. That's hugely important to us. And some of my colleagues have done some really inspiring work around how to access or how to enable underprivileged young people, how to enable them to access these opportunities that we have, and making sure that we do have a representative part of the community working with us. And we think that fosters loyalty.
I think it does, yeah. And it has me in mind, Marisa. Many years ago, you will remember that I had the privilege of actually going to Brazil, southern Brazil, with Steve Radcliffe, the author of Leadership Plain and Simple, to co-lead a Future Engage Deliver programme with Jada. And I remember asking Jada how and why he did what he did. And to this day, I remember him describing how he wanted to give the people in this very poor area of Brazil an opportunity to help each other lift themselves out of poverty, to have the security of a job, to therefore reduce crime and the need to steal and or struggle, which poverty brings. And that was so inspiring to me. And I remember vividly that conversation and many conversations with him.
And I think our leaders that are drawn to a career path of running factories and sites are very much driven by the contribution they can make to the community and the powerful change that they can bring to those communities. In some of the more hardship locations, site directors talk passionately around workplaces being safe spaces. And when employees are there, it's almost like a relief. And I feel proud that I get to work with these people every day that want to do this. And of course, we are there to make product and we are there to make a profit. It just shows that you can do both and that there's room for both. It never has to be one or the other.
That absolutely resonates with me very strongly, because I think about somebody else with whom I worked, and they described to me, not in GKN, they were saying to me, of course, my job isn't about saving lives. And I said, hang on a minute, because of some of the localities where your global company works, maybe think that through again, that it is possible that you are, through your work and your personal contribution and professionalism, you are saving lives, and never underestimate the impact that you might be having on people in that community who otherwise might not have a job, or, like what you're saying, Marisa, might find that outside of the factory or the place of work is a more dangerous place to be and more fraught than actually being in the factory, and that creating a culture in which people feel safe in a wider culture which may not feel as safe is so important.
It is. And working in manufacturing and heavy industry, physical safety has always been incredibly important. And the dialogue has shifted, I think, in the last 7 to 8 years, that it's now much about psychological safety as it is about physical safety. And again, these wonderful people and leaders in our locations introduce initiatives like mental health champions, because We're in a site of a few hundred people or 1,000 people or even 3,000 people. You just don't know what somebody's going through all of the time. And that's one of my sort of pieces of advice to leaders is really get to know your people, not just the surface, but underneath the surface. It makes a difference. And, that the way that you interact could save a life. And we've had examples of this where people have been in very dark places and their leader has noticed it and made an intervention.
And it's the impact that we have close up, but also far away through what we do. A smile, a thank you. Often it's those small interactions, interventions in somebody's day to day that for me has me feel seen and heard and understood. And I think when we come into a workplace, as so many of GKM people do, it is about being seen and heard and the opportunity to be understood. And this sometimes get missed in virtual calls where people are in team calls. Not everybody can or chooses to have their camera on, which is one thing. And I totally get that it's not for everybody. But where it can be, being like you and I, we can see each other. And so we're constantly giving each other feedback.
As an organisation, we introduce change quite frequently. And one thing we're really conscious about is that certain layers in the organisation have had 2 or 3 weeks or months to get used to the idea. So important to capture that emotional cycle of change and those thoughts and feelings and questions that we had through those initial stages, because why wouldn't anybody else have those same thoughts, feelings, questions? And they'll have different ones as well. But we have to let people have the time to catch up.
Yeah, and that's the engagement, isn't it? And I remember when we were working together on the leadership development programme, true then as now, and I can hear Steve's voice saying this, when he first published the book, which is now called Leadership Plain and Simple, he self-published it and it was called, and you would have had a copy of this, Future Engage Deliver. But he would also say that if he ever had republished it himself, he would have called it Future Engage Deliver. Because so often people go from future, right, this is the change, this is the vision, jump to deliver, let's go and deliver it. But what we haven't done, and you really highlight this, I think, in your leadership, is we haven't done the engagement. And the success of performance hinges on whether we've done a good job in engage.
It does, for sure. We covered a little bit around the brain and how that functions over the years. And change can bring that fight, flight or fear mechanism in the brain. And we know that does nothing for performance or engagement or even development. It's not something that we should be aspiring to do. It's like communication. You can think you've communicated. You can think that you've said something, but it may well not have landed. So going back around that, doing it in different forums and mediums, hugely important. And I don't think any organisation is perfect. Our organisation isn't perfect. The good thing is we keep trying. We keep on keeping on.
It takes work. Like we were saying, collaboration takes work. It's not a given. Engagement is work. You're building relationships, getting to know people, getting to know their way of working, what works for them.
And it doesn't happen overnight. It is something you need to persevere with. I never give up. And it is a strength and it is a weakness.
Sometimes I imagine you might never give up and at a cost to yourself. How do you look after yourself, sustain yourself in your leadership, given the demands, given that in human resources especially, you are there to support others. You sometimes might have to communicate a message that does or doesn't sit so well with you, or certainly may not be well received by people. How do you take care of yourself other than being with Alex, being with your mum and walking your dog?
I do think that the walking piece, I enjoy walking if I'm away with work. I do try to find a short walking route. But working in the Netherlands the last couple of years, I've chosen to stay in a hotel so that I can walk to and from work. Because that space, getting headspace for me is really important. I do need that time to reconcile what's happening, how I'm feeling about that, what I have to portray about that, and getting comfortable with it and doing it in a way that is aligned with my values and my beliefs. So that creating time and space, hugely important.
It's kind of space and time to think, isn't it? And that thinking on your feet and knowing you need that time, particularly if you've got perhaps a difficult change message to deliver to people, one that may not suit everybody immediately, thinking about it, walking. I love the work of Nancy Klein, in which she talks about one of our jobs as leaders is to help people do their best thinking. And I like to extend that to doing our best thinking together, creating a thinking environment. And again, I think that's something we don't always allow enough time for people to think before they speak. And we have to consciously, I think, create time for thinking. So I will invite people, probably more now than I used to. I feel more confident at doing this, and say, let's just take 5 minutes, almost quiet time, thinking time, and then share our thoughts, perhaps in a one-to-one and then in the whole team, to really give people space and time to think, and then for us to do our best thinking together. So that's sort of the leader, their responsibility being to create not only a safe environment, but also a thinking environment, I think matters.
For sure. And I utilise my network a lot, inside and outside of work and family, and having those thinking partners and being able to reach out to people and say, oh, we've got this coming up, or this is happening. Have you got an experience? Or you're great at always helping me navigate things. Can we just have half an hour just to talk? And I also think everybody in my team would say that I also do thinking with them as well, not just around issues for them, but they do a bit of reverse mentoring and thinking with me as well. And last year I started to mentor one of the quality team, who is just fabulous. I said to him, I'll do it, but it's got to be some reverse mentoring in this as well. So I really want to learn from you and your experiences. You're a different generation to me. I want to understand what's important to you, because that'll help shape the way that I do things moving forward. And then just about to start mentoring with another lady, again, different generation to me. And the deal is that we do the reverse mentoring as well. I just love these conversations because it's so different.
And so much to learn, isn't there, through those conversations and through learning from somebody not only of a different generation, but also maybe what they do is different.
Where they live, where they're from, their own experiences. One of them now lives in Turkey. The other one is made, and she's got an amazing story, moved from India to the Netherlands and forged a career and a life there. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to learning about her and how I can help her. So yeah, I feel blessed, Danny, that I get to do this stuff for work.
And you do such a great job. And I was reflecting on that you yourself are a role model for women in leadership, and in a manufacturing global company where certainly when I first met you, there were much fewer women at the table than I know there are now. Obviously, it's an ongoing journey, but I can only imagine that people look to you, young women especially, and look up to you as a role model in the way that you probably did when you started at GKN and looked around you, but probably couldn't find as many women role models as there are now.
So it's gone in ebbs and flows, I would say. We were doing really well, and then COVID and lots of other things, and we've slipped back, and it's the focus again. And it's an important focus for us, because I do believe that diverse teams bring better results. A lot of the leaders I work with believe exactly the same, and we will continue to strive to do that. I want to do more in this particular space around how I help bring through the females within our organisation and make sure they get a fair chance and that those routes are open and available. You're right, I didn't have a huge amount of female role models, although I think that certainly Monique Carter, who was our group CHRO, she was a fabulous role model. And before her, there was a lady called Bernadette Doyle at a prior company and Ira Williams at a prior company, who all inspired me in different ways and were successful and gave me lots of ideas of how I could be better and where I could go. So they've been hugely influential. And so have the men in my career as well. I wouldn't have been able to have gone to Cincinnati for a year if the CEO of Aerospace hadn't have backed it. And he did it in a way that made it work for me, for my home life as well as for my work life. I remember that conversation vividly where he said, I've got daughters, I want them to do well. Making that connection was hugely important. And of course, Doug was an incredible sponsor. And I remember Doug talking with some of the senior leaders at some of these events, saying, how do we sponsor more people to get through and be successful? Because they were saying that they were at the tail end of their career, and to keep the company going, they needed to encourage his pipeline. So I feel like, having been here 19 years, that I'm now in that spot where it's my job now to make sure we're successful in the future and have that healthy pipeline of future leaders, future engineers ready to step in and step up.
Wonderful, Marisa. Well, we're coming to the end of our conversation, and I like to ask this question, which is, who is the person and what is the conversation that you're going to have as a result of our conversation today?
We've got a new Chief HR Officer, Amanda, who is wonderful. And I mean, it's a passion of mine anyway in terms of our diversity and inclusion agenda. But I think I'm going to have a conversation with Amanda because she's new. It'd be good to take her on the journey of where we've been and where we could get to, and open up this idea of possibilities and the potential that we've got. Yeah, that's definitely where I'm going to take this.
Brilliant. Have a good conversation with Amanda, and I look forward to hearing how that goes. What I'd like to close with is your 3 encouragements to listeners that capture our conversation and encourage listeners to take their next step.
Yeah, so I've said one already, the getting to know your people really well and understanding what's going on for them. I think that's the biggest thing in engagement and in performance and in helping somebody to develop. And it sounds so simple, but I think life and time makes it quite difficult sometimes to do that. So just that would be my biggest encouragement. The second one is, I think that talent comes in all shapes, sizes, from different walks of life. There's not a single mould. Sometimes people can really surprise you. I would say look for the unusual suspect or the unusual candidate rather than the usual one, because they'll often surprise you. Being open-minded to that, I think, is really important. And then I think also what we talked about in terms of just finding space for yourself and taking that time to reflect upon you, how you are, continuing to learn, continuing to be curious. Last year, I started to do a bit more external networking because I have been in the company quite a long while. I don't think you can be your best unless you're continuing to learn, grow and reflect upon who you are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marisa, and thank you for our lovely conversation today. I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed connecting with you. And for people who would like to connect with you, not just in GKN, where I know you'll share our episode, but for people far and wide, how best for people to connect with you if they'd like to be part of your external network and hear more about you and get to know you better?
Yeah, for sure. I am on LinkedIn. So it's just Marisa Kismul. I think it's an unusual name, so there might not be many of us, so it might be quite easy to find me. And then I am on Facebook, I am on Instagram. Instagram is Marisa Ellis, so you can contact me through there as well. LinkedIn would probably be the main one. It seems to be the go-to place for a lot of people now.
The go-to place. Lovely. And for listeners, that's Marisa, Marisa, and Kismul, Kismul. Thank you, Marisa. Thank you so much. And for you, the listener, if you'd like to listen to more Leaders in Conversation with me, Annie Townend, do go to my website. Follow me on LinkedIn, Annie Townend. I'm also on Instagram, Annie Townend, and at collaborationequation.com. I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you for listening, and thank you to SHMOGUS Media for the production of the podcast and to Penny Writing for the marketing of the podcast. Thank you, Marisa.
Thank you, Annie.